reality is everyone who's in healthcare is incredibly passionate and really is in, if you will, the quote-unquote business for a reason. They want to make a difference. And now we need to create a system of care that allows them to do just that. So the rules of the game are changing, and the question is, what do we need to do to help change it? So as you saw, and as you are all experiencing, there is absolutely a perfect storm. If it was one thing, that would be okay, but it's everything. Everything happening at the same time. Payer mix is worse, volumes are declining, case mix is worse. There's more patients at risk. Then there's now competition for these high margin service lines and carve-outs that are happening in every single market. You don't have things like retail health up here, but everybody, if you will, is nibbling on the edge, and it's becoming harder and harder to do your job. And because we're in finance, we'll put it into a grid. This is as funny as I get. So got to start going with me now, or it's going to be a long few minutes here. But if you just focus in on the left, change in reimbursement, volume, expectations, who pays, competition, structure, literally everything is being turned upside down. And we talked last year about the music industry, which used to be called the record industry. The music industry is half the size of the record industry. So markets do change, right? And especially a market that represents a fifth of the economy. And the question is, do we fight that change? Do we embrace it? Do we lead it? Do we follow? And if you were trying to break down that grid into just one simple message, this is it. Value, defined as cost and outcomes, will be a major driver. We all know that for sure. The question is, what do we do about it? So, in order to figure out where we're going, it's really important to just stop for a second and think about how we got here to begin with. And to do that, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. So does anybody know what happened on January 17th, 1961? Anybody? Any guesses? John Kennedy got inaugurated, very close. 4 days before that, actually. Anybody? Okay, this is a very good guess here, very close. A sitting president did something they had never done before and have never done since. They did an address to the nation. So you would think Eisenhower, after 8 years, is going to do a victory lap. Very well loved, revered, great military leader who became a great political leader. But he didn't do that at all. What he did, and this is actually what he's holding in his hand, is warned, if you will, the nation about this concept of a military-industrial complex. And really what he was saying is that over the World War I, which then led to World War II eventually, now that those wars were over, they weren't over. In many ways, we were just beginning because we had created an industry that was built, if you will, for war. And the influences around it, right, could potentially create different questions that we would have to face than we had faced in our past. And you have a military leader, one of the most decorated military leaders in history, warning us in many ways about the military. Not the great things and the wonderful things and the incredible dedication of those who serve, but just what potentially could happen, unintended consequences of the industry. So the question is, around the same time, was something similar happening in another industry? So let me give you 2 data points. During World War II, the big breakthrough when it came to healthcare was that employer-based health coverage was excluded from taxable income. And what was the impact of that and some of the other changes? Well, in that time, private insurance, those Americans who were covered with private insurance, grew from 20 million people to 140 million people in the span of 10 years. What else happened? Someone called it out. Medicare and Medicaid, they were created. Within 10 years, 40 million Americans were covered under this type of approach. These were profound and unbelievable changes to the way healthcare had been practiced 40 years prior. And in many ways, we are now living in the system that was created by these 2 data points. And what does it look like? In some ways, it looks like this. The more I do, the more I document, the more I bill, the more I collect, the more I make. That system of revenue cycle management, if you will, has been, if you will, the mantra when it comes to the financial side of the house, because it was created, if you will, the industry was created, the consultants, the applications, the competencies, and everything else was built around it to help sustain this and build this up. And in some ways, this is now the revenue cycle management industrial complex. So we are dealing with an industry, right, that is incredibly difficult to change because it's how we have been compensated. It's how we have done things. So therefore, the question we have to ask ourselves, is it then how we will always do things? Or is change needed? So as we look forward, the one thing we know for sure, and the thing that I'm hearing and seeing and we're hearing and seeing from all of you, is that that same model, practiced the same way, fundamentally won't work. And the bottom line is what got us here won't get us there in terms of where we want to go. And this is my quote of the year, if you will. So this is my favorite quote. A CFO said to me, he said, I can either take it on the chin now or I can get knocked out later. I got to choose which one. What he was trying to communicate is that there is going to be a difference. I don't know exactly what will work, but if I don't try now, I will be out of the game completely. We will be out of the game completely. So what will get us there? Well, as you saw in the video, we're shifting from this, a traditional payment system, and how quickly it shifts and how dramatically it shifts, I think is a subject of great debate. But we know it's shifting to an extent, and you're looking at the percentage of insured that are covered by a payment approach, right? But what's that going to be replaced by? Well, a value-based system. We call it margin and outcomes management. So instead of revenue cycle management, which strictly focuses on payment, if you will, margin and outcomes. It can't just be margin, right? It has to be outcomes as well. And that's going to require physicians and finance coming together and collaborating. So, question is how are your peers in this room responding? Well, I'll show you. So, whenever you see me, you'll see this little fun notebook. And I write everything down, and this is how they're, there you go. That was it. This is how they're responding. So can you see that? All right, I'm done. Is that helpful? Okay, didn't work so well. This is how they're responding. That doesn't help either. Okay, so I'll put it into PowerPoint. These are the 5 things that we're seeing a lot that we thought were worth sharing and talking about a little bit. So we see MDs and finance collaborating to drive out cost and deliver value. We see major cost reductions across the board that are now being put into motion. People are implementing advanced decision support and cost accounting. We're turning price transparency into a competency, which is a really interesting topic we'll talk about. And then folks are flipping to a different approach when it comes to financial systems. So we've seen this change in clinical systems, one solution, Cerner, Epic, fill in the blank, Meditech. On the clinical side, where are we going on the financial side of the house? So let's talk about it a little bit. So in terms of what's changing, I thought this little vignette, which was published in the Harvard Business Review from Toby Cosgrove, who's the CEO and president of Cleveland Clinic, really captures it well. Cleveland Clinic, one of our clients, has been very much on the front end in terms of how they think about where healthcare is going next. So the latest breakthrough hasn't gotten much press, but it's changing medicine even as we speak. It's the dawning realization that healthcare is not about how many patients you can see, how many tests and procedures you can order, or how much you can charge for these things. So what's the breakthrough that you think he's talking about? Breakthrough is the understanding that healthcare is a value proposition. And what that means is that getting patients the right care at the right time at the right place, it's a matter of focusing on outcomes and cost so that Americans will start getting what they pay for with healthcare dollars. We have 2 targets, outcomes and cost. Until recently, providers pursued these goals separately, with doctors concentrating on outcomes and administrators trying to control cost. Value-based care does something completely different. It works to bring these targets into alignment. And the bottom line is providers who make this transition early will be rewarded. Does that resonate with everybody in the room? Yes? Okay, just say yes. Now say no if you disagree. Okay, so if that's what's happening and this change is occurring, what do we do about it? So here was his perspective.
It's interesting to see that exchange. And what is it that's different about the way other systems work that keeps costs down and quality high?
Well, we're a group practice, and we're all salaried. There's no financial incentive for us to do more or to do less. And so we've kept costs down that way. At the same time, we've been very transparent about quality, publishing it, putting it on the internet, and we think it's important that people know exactly how we do.
Yeah, and then you look at how this, I know you have great stories. you want to go? I just want to know how this all wraps around the debate around the Affordable Care Act and where you stand on that.
Well, the Affordable Care Act, we really were dealing with a 1950 healthcare system in the United States. We have to change. There's no question about it. The costs are just eating up all the other things.
Is it okay to say there was a moral need for it in some ways?
I think there is. I
Yeah.
think if we don't control the costs, which are going up very rapidly, we're going to lose things like education and all the other social activities that we need to do. So we've got to do this, and that's why I think it's called the Affordable Care Act, and
Right.
that's where the emphasis is. And so one of the things that we've done is put together an integrated healthcare delivery system that tries to drive to efficiency. So you have.
So you could have put Cleveland Clinic up there, but you could have put any organization in this room up there. Everybody is having those same conversations and trying to figure it out. And the major step that organizations are taking is this one. So each number, each data point, if you will, represents a conversation that I've had in the last 3 weeks about an organization in terms of their cost target, in terms of what they're trying to reduce it by. The interesting one is the 40 million, because when I had that conversation, the CFO was almost apologetic. Like, I know other people are doing more, we really need to figure this out, we're not quite sure how we want to approach it, but we've set an initial target, we're going to raise it. So if you don't have 9 figures, you can't sit in a room with other CFOs at this point. The point is that there's an incredible amount of cost that's being taken out, and the way that it's being taken out primarily is this. So this is from last week in the USA Today. So far this year, the healthcare sector has announced 41,000 layoffs. That, if you will, headline is the first time any of us have seen that headline, period. So the healthcare sector has been the growth engine, if you will, from an economic and a job perspective. That's now beginning to change. So what happens after the first cut? Where do you then go from there? And that's why organizations are moving towards more advanced decision support and cost accounting, trying to get down to a different level. Great article in the Harvard Business Review called "The Strategy That Will Fix Healthcare." And when I read this article, I was absolutely shocked. This is from the October issue, because one of the 5 strategies was implementing cost accounting. And I kind of just was in my office yelling and screaming. I was very excited, so geeking out on the whole thing. But here's some of the quotes from it. The absence of cost information is nothing short of astounding. The systems in place are inadequate. Providers are flying blind. And ultimately, understanding these costs is what is going to allow us to unleash value within the system. Said differently, cost is cool again. Because you need to know your cost in order to drive value. It's really that simple, and it's actually really exciting. So this is one of our clients, St. Luke's. Are you in the room? Clap your hands if you are. Oh, there we go, right in the corner. Okay. But a quote from Chad that was recently published by the Institute for Healthcare Transformation. We want to be able to cost across an episode, but then we have to marry that information with what we get paid. That's regardless of how we get paid, bundle payments or whatever it is. We need to be able to run that against our cost data, and then within that cost data, we need to understand variability. This is what we see really in every conversation that we're having, is it's not enough to run costing once a year or to kind of sort of have the information. This is something that needs to turn liquid in your organization. And if you can get clinical outcomes right away, which is where we're all heading, and many of us already are, or many of the people in this room already are, you're certainly going to need the same kind of information and data flow on the cost or financial side of the house. One of the interesting things that's happening, and we highlighted this in the video, was this Time Magazine article. And here's what's so unbelievable about this article, right? So Time Magazine's been around for a long time. The longest article in the history of Time Magazine, and the only time they featured one topic in their feature section in their history, was this. Unbelievable. So if you didn't think before that healthcare cost is a consumer issue, with high deductible health plans and the entire shift that's taking place now, it is now. And how are people responding? Well, here's Spectrum Health in Michigan. Spectrum, there you are. Okay. And you can see what they're doing is something pretty interesting. They're putting their cost, if you will, price, for hip replacement online. But you can't really see that, so let me zoom into it. That's not what they're doing. They're actually putting price and payment all online, and they're not just doing it for hip replacements, they're doing it for everything. For all surgical and medical procedures, inpatient and outpatient, childbirth, for all their diagnostic procedures. And this may seem like healthcare billboard advertising 10 years ago when you were shocked if a hospital did that, and now it's just the norm. Pricing is going to be, if you will, on the tip of people's tongues moving forward. Cost is going to be the tip of, if you will, the tongue moving forward, and you're the room, you're the group who will allow your organization to have that competency to function in that type of system. And lastly, folks are shifting to end-to-end, if you will, financial system. So on the clinical side of the house, once again, whether it's Epic or Cerner or Meditech or whoever, people have gone to one single system. And then they look to the financial side of the house where all the focus was in the 90s. And this is kind of what it looks like. You have your ERP, you got 4 different systems, one for long range or strategic planning, one for operational budgeting, a different one for capital planning, a different one for decision support, pull information from the EHR. Then everyone's running spreadsheets on their own individual computers, and people are printing things out, and they're also putting it in notepads. And this is pretty much the state of the art for the financial side of the house in a lot of organizations. And people are saying that really doesn't work. We now need to consolidate it in some way, and that's really where Jazz ultimately fits in. And whether you're pulling that information to Jazz or ultimately pushing it to an EDW, we call that the engine fuel approach. Ultimately, you're going to create an organizational engine that's going to be an EDW in some form or fashion. There's going to be different sources of fuel. You might use Press Ganey, you might use some SG2 information, you might use information from your electronic health record, from your ERP, but ultimately, all of those are sources of fuel to an overall organizational engine. And to put some data behind that, the shift in our business is over the last year, we've had a 400% increase in people who are buying that entire platform, if you will, the Jazz platform. All those things I talked about individually, buying it collectively and investing in that, whether it's from ultimately from Strata or another company, that's the way that the market is now moving. So a few things about how your peers are responding, and there's a lot more to that, but 5 I wanted to highlight. Question is, where do we fit in? So quick update on Strata. Easy way to think about us moving forward, and this is a little different maybe than you thought about us in the past. The way we think of ourselves is we're an enabling platform for, if you want to call it value, but margin and outcomes management, or something that we internally call MOM, because it's a lot more fun to say than RCM. And everyone knows MOM's always right. Our mission is why we're doing this. So our mission is to help hospitals and health systems, all of you, drive margin to fuel your mission. We didn't feel that ultimately that was the right way to look at it. So people talk about missions all the time, and your eyes glaze over, and then you start falling asleep, and you look for your coffee and hope that it's there. But this is an individual who I met recently. It's the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. His name is Benjamin Zander. And if you've seen him on 60 Minutes, you know how crazy this guy is, but he's amazingly enthusiastic. And one thing you get from Ben Zander, if you can check him out online or check out his TED Talk, which is unbelievable at TED.com or TED.org, is his passion. And that's how I want all of our organization to feel, is passionate about actually making a difference in terms of driving margin to fuel your mission, because what you do is unbelievably essential, and we want to be part of helping you to achieve that.